it is not really halal. You're essentially harming animals when you shouldn't be allowed to. Is that not right? That dust puff left from him running away. It's impressive. That's 3 p.m. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes people they do run away when they're faced with the situation. I think it's a combination of being on camera and realizing that holy shit, I might say something stupid. I might contradict myself. But yeah. Hi, you wanna try it? Just ask you some questions. I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Hi.
Are you okay being live for my YouTube channel?
What do you want me to say?
What's your name?
Hi, Mercy.
I'm Chip. Nice to meet you. Where are you from,
Nice
Mercy?
to meet you. Originally from Nigeria, I live in Scotland.
Okay, okay. So, Mercy, how do you feel about animals?
To be honest, indifferent.
Indifferent.
Yeah. To
In
be
what way?
honest.
What does that mean?
I never grew up with animals, so I've never had a pet, so indifferent.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you think that animals deserve to be considered morally by us? And by that I mean that if we're doing something that impacts them, then we should consider their well-being?
Yeah, of course. As a scientist,
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of experiments with animals, and definitely we have to consider how we treat the animals, and
Yeah.
not just because we are trying to experiment on things doesn't mean we should just pick up any animal. There should be processes and ethical procedures to go about that.
Okay, okay. Oh, you're talking about animal testing on animals,
Yeah.
right? So let's discuss a bit about animal testing. Do you think it's ethical to test products on animals?
I think it depends. A lot of the products we use, especially in pharmaceutical world, needs to be tested on animal before it comes to the human because of the side effects they might have. Yes, I understand that these side effects might affect animals negatively, but there are ethical procedures in which we get these animals to test them. So if the animals are procured unethically, I think that's where the problem is.
But let me ask you this because you say they need to be tested on animals.
Yeah.
What if they didn't need to be tested on animals? What if we have other alternatives like organs on chips or other methods to test products without involving animals? Anyway, given that 95% of the tests that we do on animals don't actually yield a good result on humans.
If there were other alternatives, then I mean, why not? Why not explore it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I would definitely opt for that if there were other alternatives. I would vote for that.
Nice. So essentially what you're saying is that if we have alternatives,
Yeah.
exploiting an animal is wrong, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I appreciate that. So let's dive into a topic that is maybe easier also for me and maybe also kind of easier for you to understand,
Okay.
like food,
Okay.
right? Animals are exploited for food. Do you agree with that?
I enjoy it for food.
But do you think they need to be exploited for food?
Oh my god. Define exploitation for food.
Well, using them against their consent and for our own benefit and against their
Can
own
an
detriment.
animal give a consent?
Well, does it matter if they can or not? Like, let me ask you this: if you
No,
couldn't
no.
give
If you're going to bring consent
Yeah.
into the matter, then the ability to say yes or no should be there, right?
So wait, let's imagine an animal cannot give consent.
Yeah,
Does that
that's
mean we
fine.
can do what we want to them?
No, it's not. It's the fact that unlike a human being, right?
Yeah.
Even if this
Not
human
all
being
humans can
couldn't-
give consent. Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Even if a human couldn't say yes or no, there is body language.
Yeah.
There are humans speak in different ways that do not necessarily have to be verbal. But how?
What if
would
there was
you
none of
know-
that?
But we do have that.
But what if there's none of that? This human being could not give consent at all. Would you still think it's okay to do what you want to do to them for your benefit and they're
No,
against their own detriment?
if there was none of that at all, I don't think we can compare human beings to animals in any way.
I mean, you said you're a scientist.
Yeah.
The fact that we test on animals,
Yeah.
products that we want to use on humans, that means we can definitely compare animals to humans because that's why
No,
we
no,
test them on animals for
Sure.
humans, right?
Quite all right. There are similarities between animals and humans,
Yeah.
but in terms of intellectual development, in terms of a lot of things,
Yeah.
humans and animals are not. It's incomparable.
Fair enough, but you would argue that
Yeah.
there's human beings who have the intellectual capacity of an animal.
if you say so.
There are. You don't have to trust me on this one. There are
Hands
plenty
up
of people.
if you say so.
Yeah. So there's, for example, the intellectual capacity of a pig is that of a 3-year-old child.
Okay.
You have heard of people who have mental retardation or
Yes,
have
that's right. Yeah.
certain conditions
Yeah.
that keep them from developing
Yeah.
past the age of 2 or 3
Yeah,
years
that's
old,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So essentially, they are with the intellectual capacity of an animal.
Yeah.
would it be okay? Those individuals cannot consent properly.
It would not be okay because that's a
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah.
The value you would place on a human being cannot be compared to the value you would place on an animal. As much as I'm indifferent about an animal, or I would say do not treat an animal wrongly, I don't think comparing the value you place on a human and an animal is the same. So whether they are retarded or not retarded, that person has to be treated like a human being.
Let's say intellectually challenged. I really don't like that word because
Okay.
it's been used in a derogatory way,
that's
even if
fine.
indeed it is a scientific term theoretically. But people have been using it in a derogatory
Yeah.
way towards people. I mean, because there is a condition that is called that way, and that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But like, let me ask you this. You said humans and animals are different, but
In terms of value.
Yeah, in terms of value. But this value that you call, it's value that you place differently, right? Like, let's imagine this way. You obviously have your own value system.
Yeah.
You were here with some friends. I'm sure
Yeah.
that your friends value to you more than I do. And if you were to be having a pet, you don't. But if you were to be having a pet, so probably your pet would be valued more than I am, right?
yeah.
Because essentially you develop a relationship to them, and you have all this, and you create this value scale system.
Yeah.
And that's the extrinsic value,
Yeah.
right? The external value, the value that you place on others.
Yeah.
But do you think that that's what matters? Because if I have zero value to you, you shouldn't be allowed to do whatever you want to me just because I have zero value to you, right?
No, you're absolutely right. There are things where we can place like where value is subjective. But
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the value of a human being, that's not a subjective thing.
But do you
That's
know which
up
value?
to
Do you know what we
you
call that
or
value?
I.
Yeah, that value we call it intrinsic value.
Yes.
It's value that comes from within, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you have that, I have that, and we acknowledge that we do.
Yeah.
And that's that value comes from us being sentient, from us saying I want to live, from my desire to live, from my desire to be happy, and from my desire for freedom.
Yeah.
Well, all of these animals have it too. They have a desire to live, they have a desire to be happy, and they have a desire for freedom.
Can I ask you how you know that animals have a desire to be happy? I'm not
there's-
saying animals do not, but how do you know they have a desire to be
For
happy?
the same reason I know you do, right? It's just observational data.
No. I can tell you that I have a desire to be happy. He
Yeah.
can tell you he has a desire
Fair
to
enough,
be
but
happy.
if you couldn't tell me that you have a desire to be happy, it would be implied that you have a desire to be
You would
happy.
assume that
I
I
would
have-
assume,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I would make an assumption based on maybe your behavior, like you just mentioned before, right?
What if the animal has a desire to be eaten?
I don't think any animal has the
How
desire
do you
to be
know
eaten.
that? Oh
well,
my God.
even if they did, let's assume that it is. You can imagine that would be an edge case scenario, right? You can imagine that evolution had all of the animals, including ourselves, have evolved alongside. We're all just as evolved. There's no reason why an animal would develop the desire to die or to be brought into
There are
existence
human
only to be
beings with
killed.
desires to die. So
Yeah,
how
but
much more
that's
an
called
animal?
depression, right?
So
It's not. It's an exception.
Exactly.
It's not,
So we're saying the same thing, right? In essence,
we're not. What I'm saying is that animals have internal value, have intrinsic value,
but I'm
because
saying,
they
how
desire
do you
to
know
live.
that? How do
That they
you
desire
know that?
to live.
Yes.
Well, because they're sentient.
But you're not giving me any.
Because they're conscious and they're sentient. Because they
Yeah.
have a subjective experience of the world.
Human beings can tell. Human beings strive with a desire to live, even when things are not going well for them or whatever the case may be. You can see even without them telling you they want to leave. Even the ones
Well,
that
let me
are
ask you this.
depressed.
Yeah, well, let me
But
ask
with
you-
animals, the reason why I'm a bit confused is you have said that they have a desire to be happy, right?
They have one. It's one of their desires. Yeah, to be not necessarily. Let me put it this way. They have a desire for positive valence emotions. Do you know what
Okay.
that means? Not necessarily happiness, because happiness, happiness. You
Desire
and
to
I may
thrive.
define it differently, right? Like you may define happiness as you feel in contempt. I may define happiness as constantly feeling this emotion of uplifting emotion, right?
Yeah.
So happiness is quite a weird word.
Yeah.
What I meant is positive valence emotions, and all of these animals do have positive valence emotions and negative valence emotions, and they all desire, of course, just like we do, positive valence emotions.
Okay. So just because this part of what you're saying, I'm not sure because
There's
I haven't researched
Yeah.
it. So I was about to ask you: are
Yeah.
there like researches?
Yeah, there's
of this,
research
and
into this.
How did they go about that to conclude on that?
So there's research done on animals to see
Yeah.
if they're sentient, right? If they have these emotions. It's done pretty much the same way you'd tests on animals. They perform tests where they hurt them in one way, and then they see the reaction based on what reaction they have to a certain object,
Yeah.
right? Like if that object has harmed them, then they would avoid that object, and them avoiding that object inherently means that they had a negative emotion towards
Right.
that object, right? And based on all of this and all of these empirical data that has been piling up, they created the Declaration of Consciousness by Cambridge, and there's the New York Declaration of Consciousness, both signed by Nobel laureates and highly regarded scientists.
Yeah.
And they all acknowledge that these animals are sentient, that they're conscious, and that they're pretty much like us. This is my own statement. They're like us in all the ways that matter. Do you know what that means?
In all the ways that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let me put it this way. Do you think discriminating based on somebody's intelligence is a valid way to discriminate on them?
Again, you're going back to human beings.
No,
and
I'll
animals.
just explain why. No, so I think animals are someone too.
No, I don't believe that. I'm sorry.
But you may not believe that, but they have a subjective experience. The fact that they have a subjective experience
Yeah.
means that they are a someone. That's
no,
it.
that doesn't mean they're humans.
That doesn't mean that they're humans.
Yeah.
It just means that they're a someone. It means that somebody is making decisions.
Yeah.
Someone means that they have a personality, one, makes them a somebody, and they have a subjective experience. That means they decide, they experience the world around them just like you
Yeah.
are now, just like I am now, right? So just the fact because they were not born the same species as me, human, doesn't mean that they are somehow inferior or different enough to me to justify cutting their throat for something I don't need, correct? Because we can always, for food, we can choose different things, like we can for medical testing. And in the case of testing, you said, well, we should. So I'm assuming
So does this apply to all animals?
all animals, yeah.
All animals.
No animals deserve
So-
to be exploited and slaughtered, yeah.
Okay. So when you have like an infestation of rats,
Yeah.
sorry to say, or things like that, infestation of
You should try to get rid of
whatever.
them, not kill
yeah,
them.
yeah. So how best do you in your personal
So let's put it this
without
way, if
killing
I
them? I don't mean like, for example, if you have one rat, there's a way
Yeah,
you can.
yeah.
I'm coming from a place where at least before I moved to the UK, when you go to Africa, I can speak for Nigeria,
Yeah.
not the whole of Nigeria, but I can speak
Yeah.
for certain places where people live and there are 20 rats crawling
Yeah.
up their homes, or ants, flies, mosquitoes, and stuff like that cause various illnesses.
Yeah, so let me put it this way.
Yeah.
So if you're within your house, you try to remove them, you try to deter them. So you maybe put like, I don't know, basil or something they don't like, or
Yeah.
use certain substances to keep them away. You never keep food, like you do all the methods to try to keep them
Yeah.
away, but still they come back and they
Yeah.
pose a risk to your health.
Yeah.
Then I think it's justified to do whatever you need to do to keep them out of your house. Just like it would if a human being were to be invading your house,
Okay,
correct?
so I think I understand.
You see what I mean?
No, I
Like,
think
it's
I
a
understand. I
justifica-
understand your point
Yeah.
now. Again, it still goes down.
It's
to,
about need. If you
yes,
don't
I
need
think
to
it still
do
goes
it,
down to the point where you see animals the way you see a human being, right?
I see them as individuals. I wouldn't say I see them the same because I obviously care about humans more than animals because
Why?
Because I'm human myself and because I can develop relationships with humans way easier than I can with
Well, you
animals.
can with animals.
I can
dogs.
also with animals. I just that's just my preference. Let's put it this way,
That's
okay? It's
fine.
not, but that doesn't mean I don't respect animals. I still respect them, and I still give them the bare minimum respect of body autonomy. And that means I wouldn't pay for somebody to do whatever I want to them so that I get a product out of them. You see what I mean? Like I respect their autonomy. I wouldn't.
Do you eat animals?
I don't. No, no. That's essentially it.
It's been
right?
nice. I gotta go.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I still have to eat chicken.
Why do you have to? You don't have
because
to.
they're meant to be enjoyed. I promise you.
They're not.
meant,
Who
they
gave them
are
that
meant-
purpose?
Because they're meant
Who
to
gave
be
them that
enjoyed.
purpose?
Who gave them a purpose otherwise?
Well, so do you think it's okay to bring somebody into existence with a
So you are
purpose that you
still
give them?
bringing human beings.
Do you think
and
it's okay to bring an
animals
animal
together.
into existence
You're
for
still
what-
bringing human beings
Wait,
and animals.
do you
in the
think
same
it's okay?
place.
I'll,
It's
I'll,
not
I'll
the
rephrase.
same.
I'll rephrase. Do you
Yeah.
think it's okay to bring an animal into existence, to use them however you want, for your purpose?
I'm not the one bringing them.
Do you
into
think it's okay to do
existence.
this? I'm asking.
But that question is not valid because I'm not bringing them.
You are
to
the one
us.
paying for this, so I'm
Yeah.
curious if you think it's okay to
No,
do
I'm
this.
paying to eat them.
You're paying for somebody to bring them into existence, cut their
No, I'm
throat,
not paying for
chop them into
somebody,
pieces so
no.
that you can eat them.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, I
why
believe
and
so.
why exactly wouldn't it be okay to do to a human the same thing?
Because they don't have the same back to value. They don't have the same. You
That's
cannot
external
compare
value. They have the same
value.
intrinsic value, yeah.
No, you can't
They have
compare
exactly the same
value of
intrinsic
an
value.
animal to a human being, no matter
you.
how we want to
To
place
you.
it. So even the animals.
No. To every animal, their species will matter more than our species, of course. Do you think to a cow
I do
they
not
would
think
rather
so.
put a human being on first? They would rather die for you?
I do not think animals and human beings should be on the same
We
plane
are
or in
animals.
the
What are
same.
you talking about?
Yeah,
We're mammals.
of course, we're talking about animals like chicken and the rest, like lesser animals.
So what exactly
right?
is that different? Okay, what is the morally significant difference between a chicken and a human that justifies cutting the
A
throat of
human
someone
being.
for optional food?
No, someone. Again, you're back to someone. I've
That
got to
justifies
go. My
cutting them.
friends are waiting
Don't
for
bog
me.
down in this word.
No,
That
I've got to
just
go. My
justify
friends are
cutting their
waiting for
throat
me.
for optional product.
But
What is the difference?
for optional products,
Yeah, it's optional. You don't have to eat chicken.
just because you don't eat chicken
No,
doesn't
you don't
mean
have
other
to eat
people don't have to
no,
eat chicken.
you don't have to.
No,
For your
I
health,
have
you don't
to.
have to.
I have to.
You don't have to.
You,
I'm a
if
certified
you choose-
nutritionist.
If you choose
There's
not
plenty of
to,
studies you can thrive on a plant-based diet. You don't have to.
I don't have to
You
go
don't have
that
to.
route because you go that route.
No. You don't have to for your health or any
No.
reason. You can choose to, but you don't have to. You
I'm
understand the
choosing
difference
to-
between
I'm choosing
obligation
to, yes,
and
I
choice?
Get you. So I'm choosing to eat animals.
Yeah. So what is the difference that justifies killing them for optional food? Because you're choosing them.
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
optional to you.
I am choosing to
So
eat
what is that
animals for
difference
my-
that justifies
I-
killing them for optional food?
That's my choice.
But what is that difference that
I
justifies?
don't need to. I don't
So
need to
wait, if I
explain
have,
that difference.
if let me ask you this:
Yeah.
if I, because you put this arbitrary line at species, right? If you put this arbitrary line at species and say it's okay to kill this species
No,
because
you
they
are-
are not
you-
the same species as me, because that's the only difference you can justify. What is
Oh,
it?
okay.
Intelligence you
Chess.
cannot, sentience you cannot. So you just created an arbitrary line where you think oppressing individuals is okay. That's the same reasons how we justified all forms of oppression. Sexism, racism, all of this have coming from exactly the same mentality. The same mentality. I can oppress somebody, therefore I would. I'm not gonna let her go. Jesus Christ. I thought, like, I went so nice, I went so easy, I tackled every argument that she had. I thought she was about science. I thought she had a point. She doesn't. It's insane. Do you see the cognitive dissonance that some people fucking have when it comes to animal products? It's insane. I want to do it, therefore it's justified. How? How is that ever justified? If I want to do something that is cruel and unjust, it's not justified. And just because the victim is a different species than me does not give me any form of moral justification for me to do whatever I want to them. Okay, let's retreat and see the next one. Yeah. You did your very best. Yeah, exactly. Look at you break down because you didn't get your way. No. Actually, I know. I just get a little bit frustrated. Well, not even, I wouldn't call it frustrated. Let me see what this emotion that I'm feeling right now is. It's a disappointing experiment. No, English only. That's okay. Portuguese, I don't speak Portuguese. What time is it over there? It is 1:40. Just leave people alone. Do you think me sitting with a sign that says I'm doing a social experiment, come talk to me, is me bothering people? I'm literally just sitting and people come to me. But it's interesting that you're projecting your well, not insecurity, but you're projecting your experience onto me because somehow it bothers you what I'm doing here. Well, it shouldn't bother you. I am here to speak up on behalf of animals. It is an injustice what we do to them. Forcing them into slaughterhouses, exploiting and slaughtering them is a major injustice. And we need more people to know about it, and we need more people to change and not be part of it. That's it. And speaking of, I think I will move a little bit on that side. Yeah, just leave animals alone. Look at that. Thank you, everybody. That's awesome. Okay. I'm just asking people some questions. You want to try it? Are you okay being live for my YouTube channel?
Yeah, I guess so.
Can you come here? What's your name?
Ted,
Ted. Nice to meet you. I'm Chip, Ted.
Nice to meet
Where are
you
you
too.
from?
Florida.
Florida. Okay. So, Ted, do you have an animal that you've bonded with?
That's alive or dead?
Either way.
Yes.
Yes. Do you think that, have you noticed that that animal maybe has a wish to have a good life, to maybe seek comfort, maybe seek happiness and stuff like that?
Of course.
Of course. Okay. Okay. Do you think that if that animal, can you tell me what animal are we talking about? By the
A
way?
dog.
A dog? Oh, you've had a dog.
Lots of dogs. I've got multiple
Ah,
dogs.
okay. Okay. Do you think that if that dog wants to live, then we should consider their wish morally, or that their wish matters just as much as if they were human?
This is a crazy conversation that
Yeah.
my sister is literally going through this right now with one of her dogs.
Yeah.
And I disagree with her.
What exactly do you mean?
So, Mom, this is crazy. The question he just asked me is about how you should treat a dog the same way as if you should treat a human. This is trippy.
I didn't ask you exactly that. What
Well,
I
you know
asked
what I
you
mean.
is that if your dog has the will to live, should we consider their wish morally just as much as we should consider the wish of a
Yeah.
human to live?
This is so.
Interesting.
I-
We're just going through that with the
Yeah. So when I put, we had to put an animal down,
Yeah.
and the veterinarian said to me, "If you're thinking about it, it's too late."
Yeah.
So that I was like, that's a pretty mean thing to say to somebody when they're like starting the grieving process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said the same thing to my sister, and she said, "I don't believe in that. The dog, Mora, she's gonna live until she's done.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make that decision for her."
But I'm guessing you made that decision for the benefit of the dog, right?
My particularly in my situation, my dog was having seizures. My dog was
Yeah.
not in a
It was a
healthy, happy.
yeah.
I couldn't watch my dog live like that.
I understand that. It was like a mercy kill
Yes.
more than anything. It was for their benefit. But when I mean this, that we should consider their wish to live morally, it's not necessarily that, yeah, sure, there are situations when we can go against that for their benefit, but what if it's not for their benefit? Should we,
Like animal testing, etc.
like animal testing?
Yeah, no, that's
No,
not
we
doesn't have a
disagree
place.
with
Yeah,
that.
we
it
should
doesn't have a
we
place.
shouldn't do that, right?
I don't believe that.
Okay.
I don't believe.
By the way,
in
do
that.
you know which animals they test on most of the times?
I want to say rabbits and mice.
Beagles.
Oh, I did know that.
What'd you say?
Beagles.
Beagles.
See, I was
Yeah,
just
there's
going to say
a-
dogs, but I didn't know the breed.
There's a huge testing facility in New Jersey that
Yes.
Trevor used to live by, and all of the animal shelters around them were full of beagles.
So
Yeah.
why beagles?
Because they're very docile. They just do what as they're told.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's trippy.
No, I totally agree against it.
So where are we going? Where are we going with this?
Let me ask, why is it animal testing bad?
Why animal testing is bad? Because you're inflicting possible harm onto an animal, mammal that can feel and process that harm.
Yeah.
And have lasting repercussions and lasting effects and scarring from that harm.
Yeah.
Where I'd argue if you're testing it on a jellyfish, I'd argue like my moral stance would probably be a lot less.
I don't know about jellyfish if
Right.
they feel as you mentioned.
My
but-
assumption
but-
is
yeah.
They do monkeys.
Yeah, but all of these, as you mentioned, you're right, because they feel and all of this. And also, I would also add the extra quantifier that we don't need to do this to them, right?
I would
We don't.
assume that as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I don't know how much medicine and how much human beings have benefited from that
Yeah.
testing. I would assume we could have probably found other ways to do it.
nowadays there are definitely
Right,
other
yeah.
ways. Yeah, maybe in the past not so much, but nowadays there are other ways.
Right.
But let me ask you this. Okay, that's animal testing. And as you said, right, it's bad because we don't need it, and because animals, they have emotions, they have feelings. Sorry, I'm just looking into
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the standardization. But let me ask you: do you think? And I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to be direct with it, and look out for your emotions. What comes up,
Okay.
because you might come a bit like. No, your emotions might all of a sudden become like as if I'm your enemy. I'm
No,
not.
no,
okay?
no, no.
So what about the animals?
Just because I'm from Florida doesn't mean I'm.
No, that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not it. But like my experience with
Yeah.
people in general. Like when it comes to cows, chickens, pigs, these animals can also feel. We don't need to exploit and slaughter them for food, and
Okay.
yet we continuously do. Correct.
So, I'm in the food industry.
Yeah.
I used to operate catering companies, opening restaurants, etc.
yeah.
I don't have a clear answer on that because it's a confliction, right?
Yeah.
Like, I fish a bunch too, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when you kill the fish on the boat, and you, like with salmon, like we had our club and like we clubbed it, right? And that's like a pretty powerful thing to do, right?
Especially given that you don't need to, right?
Well, like that's where like my argument like would probably come into play. Like I don't think you can live, your body can live and produce and behave at its 100% without animal protein.
I used to believe that too, but let me ask you, what
So-
would convince you of otherwise? Because I can tell you that there's empirical data, that I'm a
There's the
certified
Cornish diet.
nutritionist.
There's a
that-
Cornish diet. There's a bunch of these diets that are
Yeah.
like vegan that reduce cardiac issues that
Yeah.
even can beat some cancers, right?
Yeah.
Like so, diet's a huge part of that.
yeah,
I'm not saying that
we
that's
can
not
thrive
a
on a
possibility.
plant-based diet, right? But like,
I don't know if you can thrive. I think you can sustain.
well, there's the largest organization of nutritionists on the planet, which is by no means a vegetarian or vegan organization. They say that a human being can thrive on a plant-based diet regardless of their age and regardless of what situation they are in life, and by that they mean pregnancy or all these
Sure.
other situations.
So, my nutritionist has suggested I get 190 to 210 grams of protein
oh,
a
I
day.
get 250 to 300, and I'm vegan, so
Yeah.
you can
So
definitely
that's
achieve
like,
that.
and the work. I'll also say this, which is the selfish part of this conversation. I need more convenience in my life, so this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
Is that I need more convenience in my life so that I can eat an organic, local piece of chicken.
Doesn't matter. Like,
Well,
these-
hold on. Like I'm explaining, right? Just
Yeah.
like you did, right? So that's an easier amount of protein than making lentils from scratch. And I'll also say this: I can't eat a lot of legumes because it'll blow up my intestines.
But if you were that chicken that was raised locally and organic, as you say, would you accept that as a justification for somebody to cut your throat and chop you into pieces because
Well, the chicken
because
doesn't
it's
know. The
convenient to
chicken
them?
doesn't know it's getting cut into pieces. The chicken.
They do know when they go to
No.
slaughter, and doesn't matter that regardless if they know if they're going to go to slaughter or not. I could also argue, let's say you wouldn't know that you're going to be chopped into
Is the
pieces. or
goal
not.
of your
You would still
conversation
not
to
want
change my eating?
The
What's-
goal is
what's
the
goal of your
conversation, yes, is to get more people to go
You
vegan.
want to have a conversation,
yeah,
not like
yeah.
a
Yeah, the goal of the
this is like a
conversation.
scolding almost.
Well, the goal of the conversation, as I told you, check your emotions because a lot of people already start seeing me as the enemy. But the
No,
reality is,
I
what
don't.
I'm trying to say is that if you say you're against harm towards animals, like the sheer definition, what you said is wrong. That
Why
what we
don't-
do
why
to
don't-
beagles,
why don't-
it should be wrong if we do to any other animal. There's no specific
Right, but you
reason
can't-
why beagles
Well, we've
are
domesticated
deserving.
dogs,
of,
right? Like, we've
all of these animals are
domesticated dogs.
domesticated, but it doesn't
Right,
really
but-
matter, does it? The
Sure,
fact that
it's
they
a
feel.
connection. You have emotions, right?
But the
I'm
reason-
emotionally connected to a dog. I'm not emotionally connected to a chicken.
So do you think that's a good enough moral justification? Because if I'm not emotionally connected to let's say is she your mom?
You
Your mom,
asked
would
me
it
if
be
I
more
would, but your conversation in the very
Yeah.
beginning. Start with your first question. What was your first question?
if you ever bonded with an animal?
Correct.
Yeah.
So right there, you're trying to set that bond to the end. Like you just changed your conversation, right? I'm bonded to a dog.
Yeah.
Which
The reason-
changes my conversation and my choices, right?
The reason
I'm
why-
not bonded with the chicken.
The reason why I asked that question, by the way, it isn't because I want you to think only about that, but rather because when you bond with an animal, you kind of understand their individuality and you kind of see them as individuals,
Sure.
right? But if you then extend that logically, you can obviously say that all these other animals are just as much individuals as that dog is. You don't have
No,
to
I get
bond
that.
with them to acknowledge that, correct?
I would agree with that. I'm not arguing
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So if they're individuals just as much as that dog is, then the fact that you have a special connection with them or not shouldn't matter on
course
your
it does.
decision whether to exploit and
It matters
slaughter
with
them for
humans
optional
too. It matters in
products.
humans too, though,
But
right?
in humans,
Are
I would
you gonna
never
be
commit
more-
an atrocity or be cruel and unjust
you-
towards a
am
human
I
just
more-
because I don't have an
am I more
any
willing-
relationship with them.
Reality check. That's my mom.
Yeah.
Am I more willing if someone attacks my mom or puts my mom in danger? I'm more willing and will do. I'll hit that person. I'll never hit my mom.
Yeah.
Right? So that right there is like, I think the problem in your conversation is that there is connections to people that dictate their
But let me-
behaviors and choices.
Let me explain it this way. So there's extrinsic value, the value that you place on individuals, like you said, your
Sure.
mom is on top of
Like the
of
dog.
your value list. The dogs may be somewhere there, and then me. For you, I'm a zero value individual, right? If I die tomorrow, you don't really are not affected by it because
I
you don't
wouldn't
really know
know.
me. Yeah, exactly. And even if you did, you're like,
If
okay.
I found out tomorrow, I picked up the newspaper and a guy with
Yeah.
a Morty hat on, be like, oh, that fucking sucks. I
That
would talk to
fucking
that guy.
sucks. Yeah.
I talked to that
And
guy
you move on-
yesterday.
and you
yeah.
move on, right?
I'm like,
Like,
oh, I'd pause, but like, I'm not going to go
Exactly.
to your funeral.
Exactly, right? So my values, the value that you place on me is considerably lower. But what you do is you acknowledge my individuality and you acknowledge that I have internal value, I have intrinsic value because I'm a being who feels, who thinks, and who wants to live.